Happy Monday! JK, there's no such thing, but the sweat is on your screen and ready to put a big old fat smile on your face. I'm Emerson Lotzia. Ryder Cup week is here, everybody. We're going to preview some of the odds available in the DK Sportsbook with our gorgeous golf gurus. We're going to price check around the diamond, and we're going to preview tonight's Monday Night Football Showdown between the Lions and the Packers. DFS and sports betting there. But first, another unpredictable Sunday around the NFL, so let's overreact to a few storylines in this edition of NFL Hangover. Good morning, DraftKings contributors. Reed T. Fowler on the right, Julian Edlow on the left, Jeff Ulrich, little Jeff sandwich this morning. Andy Dalton's, yeah, I know, delicious, right? Andy Dalton's injury forcing Matt Nagy's hand in Chicago. Justin Fields taking over in the second half of the Bears' win over Cincinnati. The rookie didn't look all that great, guys, going 6 of 13, 60 yards, and a pick through the air, adding 31 yards on the ground. Now, after the game, listen to this. Fields said, "I don't think I'm pleased with how I played it all. I think there's a lot more in me that I have to show. That's going to come with time." That time could come as soon as week 3. So, Reed, how much should people consider him in DFS against the Browns?
Yeah, I think in cash games, guys, I think he's viable. Absolutely. He's $5,200. The rushing upside, even if you think he's not going to play well and he's going to put up another stinker, like it's just too juicy to pass up on, especially if you're playing cash. But if you're playing tournaments, I think there is a case where you can fade a guy like Justin Fields against the Browns. I do think that at $5,200, he's going to be chalk. And if you want to spend, if you want to eat that chalk and I try and get the rushing upside that you get from Justin Fields, I think there's other places that you can go. I think you can pay up next week. You want to take a wait and see approach, because I do think that he is going to be popular, especially when all of us, and I'm sure including on this panel, all of us wanted Justin Fields and thought Justin Fields should start week 1 with the way he played during the preseason. So I would stay away from GPPs, but I think in cash, he's definitely viable.
Yeah, you definitely were one of those people on this panel, Reed. I remember you tweeting about it last week. You were pretty fired up about it, dude. Jeff, how popular do you think he's going to be in week 3?
It's tough to say. I mean, the top quarterbacks are absolutely slamming right now. So, how cheap, like I don't think Justin Fields is setting up as a must play or anything, but at the same time, you look at the cheap quarterbacks, what other options are there down there? I mean, the Jameis Winston thing is done already. Matt Ryan against the Giants sounds terrible. Jared Goff is Jared Goff. So, yeah, Fields is going to be like the only viable cheap opportunity. So I kind of get what Reed is saying. Like, if he's going to be really popular for GPPs, that may set up as a fade. But I like the matchup here. I mean, Cleveland's weakness is against the quarterback. It's against the pass. They're 5th in terms of fantasy points allowed to quarterback through 2 games. It's a small sample, but this goes back to last year with Cleveland as well. So, again, 10 rushing attempts for Justin Fields. Didn't even play the whole game last week. That's pretty much all you need to know. This is going to be a high-end quarterback. I'm not really too worried about what happened last week, quite frankly. Also, let's give the Bengals defense a little bit of credit because they played well. I think this is a really good matchup, and I think he's too cheap. So my recommendation would be to get a piece of him and Allen Robinson next week, because you're not going to see this price tag for too long on him.
Yeah, Jules, with Dalton hurt, Nagy has no choice but to turn it over to Justin Fields. I mean, he's obviously got that unique mobility, but he's got to bring him along as a passer here, too.
Yeah, not too much to add here. I think I'm not worried at all about the, inconsistencies that we've seen so far, because week 1, he's plugged in as like a gadget guy on the road against a really good Rams defense in prime time. Week 2, he gets in for an injured Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton comes back. Andy Dalton gets injured again. There's no consistency there. So I put no stock in any of the numbers we've seen so far. It's a fresh start when you get named the starting quarterback. You have the week to prepare as the starting quarterback. I think he'll be much better, much more consistent, and have much more confidence just kind of being the guy. So going against the Browns defensive front on the road in your first start, maybe not ideal, but like Jeff said, they can be had in that secondary. So yeah, the bottom line here is is Justin Fields a top 10 fantasy quarterback next week? No, probably not, but he's $5,200, so he deserves consideration for sure.
All right, well, Bill Belichick's defense here, guys, completely overwhelming another rookie quarterback. Zach Wilson throwing 4 interceptions, couple of them a little touch of bad luck in there, a couple others pretty bad, just bad decisions. Now, that was against the Pats. New York head coach Robert Saleh talked about Wilson after the game, saying he's an electric dude. He's competitive as crap, and he wants to win so bad, but sometimes it's okay to be boring. There's no way you are touching this kid in DFS right now, are you, Jeff?
Well, not in week 3. Denver, the place where like even good quarterbacks like Tom Brady sometimes struggle. No, I'm not going to be touching Zach Wilson. And let's make this simple because let's really talk about Denver here. I mean, this is an elite defense who they've come out of the season playing well, and they still haven't really got those turnovers. They dropped about 4 interceptions versus Daniel Jones week 1. I don't know how many they're going to get against Zach Wilson, but I do think the opportunity is going to be there. Look, it's a rookie head coach. It's a rookie quarterback. The Jets never really had the talent, on defense or even like with the offensive line and stuff to kind of just make this work from the get-go. We all knew this was going to happen, and it's happening. I think Zach Wilson's really talented. I think that long-term you could see him spark, and I think that you could see some spike weeks for DFS. It's not going to happen in week 3, though, so we really don't need to talk about him too much.
All right, Jules, just steer clear of this guy in week 3.
Zach Wilson's ownership in week 3 is going to be 0.001%. And that one bozo that rosters him is named Kenny Ducey. Otherwise, Nobody else wants a piece of this guy. He stinks. Like, I'm not even as optimistic as Jeff on his long-term prospects here. Like, Zach Wilson was a mid-3rd, 4th round draft pick that flashed in his last year against BYU against nobody. He threw more interceptions yesterday against the Patriots than he did in his last year at BYU, playing against nobody. There's going to be a lot of struggles here, and when you're trying to develop with the Jets, it's not a good place for your long-term value. We're seeing Sam Darnold show some improvements outside of New York, so maybe if Zach Wilson is a rare case that gets out of New York early enough, like Darnold, maybe there's a chance. But it's not often that you give up on a top 3 quarterback that early. Leave it to the Jets to do it twice and give up on both of these guys early. But no, like Jeff said, there's going to be weeks where, the Jets have a positive game script, passing from behind against a team that's not as good of a defense as Denver in Denver. But no, you don't touch them this week at all.
Reed, technically interceptions are completions, so if you add those 4 to Zach Wilson's completion percentage, it's really not so bad, actually.
Yeah, I was standing shoulder to shoulder with Julian while we were watching this game, and he was saying all the things that he's saying right now on this program. As
Kenny Ducey and Zach Wilson are going to be flipping burgers together by the holidays, out of jobs.
Yes, he was giving me the play-by-play in his Twitter feud with one Kenneth Ducey. I digress. But yeah, Julian, these guys are right. I do think, though, the main point is that $5,000 at $4,800 at 51, whatever he's going to be in the weeks coming, there's going to be one of these weeks where he's going to get you 4x points, right? There's going to be a week because the Jets secondary and this defense is not great. The one thing, though, that does take you away other than his deficiencies as a passer right now in trying to dissect coverage is this offensive line has shown that this is a weakness as well, right? I mean, you saw what happened with him. He was sacked, 1,000 times if you asked Steve Buchanan. His big throw percentage was awful. His turnover-worthy plays were awful. And a lot of that was because he got hurried quite a bit. You saw that. And the Patriots don't have an extremely aggressive and stout defensive line. Their secondary is really, really good in New England. So I think there are going to be some weeks where Zach Wilson is viable, but it's not next week.
All right, Jules, I'll start with you on this one. Can we just give Tom Brady the MVP right now? Because 5 touchdown passes against Atlanta on Sunday. He now has 9 this season, 1 for each decade he's been alive. Last year, he was nasty, winning a Super Bowl, but that was more about real life than fantasy. But does this hot start for TB12 mean that he's once again fantasy elite?
He's a very good fantasy quarterback. I will say, it came against Dallas and Atlanta. 2 good matchups. So I don't think he's going to average or continue to just roll with the 30 DraftKings points per game that he's getting right now. Tough road matchup against the Rams next week. We're going to learn a lot. This game's a pick'em. I kind of lean to the Bucs, a little bit more polished, carrying all that momentum from the Super Bowl, bringing everybody back, where the Rams have a couple of good wins, but it was a dicey one in Indy, and they kind of have new pieces that they're gelling together there. But just as it pertains to Brady as a fantasy quarterback, yeah, I mean, it looks like the Bucs offense is clicking. They don't lean on much of a run game. They really throw the ball. They have a million targets, many of them that Brady's very familiar with already. So, yeah, I don't see why Brady's not going to be pretty much an every week consideration as a guy that can get you 30-plus fantasy points.
Yeah, Reed, do you agree with that? An every week consideration, you got to do it with TB12?
Yeah, I mean, he threw the ball 11.3 yards down the field. He was always looking at the first down marker. I mean, the big thing on Brady last year, especially at this time, was that he couldn't pass deep. And that was, towards the end of the season, that was disputed, or that was downplayed very, very quickly by what he was doing in the passing game, especially when Antonio Brown came to town. But the one thing that I do think that keeps him fantasy viable outside of what Julian was saying about his receivers is this secondary. And I tweeted it out. The secondary is going to be a liability moving forward. We're seeing it right now, and they're dealing with some injuries, but especially a guy like Ross Cockrell. If he's your guy that comes in when one of your starting DBs get hurt, that's going to be tough. When he's targeted, a passer rating is 144.8. That's nearly perfect for the opposing quarterbacks. You saw Matt Ryan, who only put up 6 against Philly, dissect that secondary fairly easily, where they kind of got back into that game very quickly, and then TB did what he does, and he closed the door. I will say that this secondary, though, is going to allow you to have games like he has if, for whatever reason, that he's not throwing 5 touchdowns.
Jeff, you know what's interesting? He has 9 passing touchdowns through 2 games and has still scored just 6 more fantasy points than Jalen Hurts and Daniel Jones. Those two have combined for 5 passing touchdowns.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just shows you how powerful rushing quarterbacks are, obviously. And Tom Brady, well, I mean, he does rush, but he only rushes from the 1-yard line. But a lot of this is schedule-driven, obviously. But Tom Brady, it's such an interesting dynamic. He is in the perfect fantasy offense. Reed alluded to the weak secondary, the weak defense, but Bruce Arians, he's always been the chuck it down the field. He made Jameis Winston into just a super, super duper fantasy viable quarterback almost every week, despite the fact he was throwing 3 picks every week as well. Tom Brady doesn't throw those picks. He's better at closing the door, like Reed said, but he's still throwing down the field a ton. This is going to be an all-year thing, but we've definitely had like the best Tom Brady situation because his arm is fresh. He's had 2 weak opponents. Let's see what he does against the Rams next week, because this is going to be an interesting spot. I think Matthew Stafford is probably going to dice up this Tampa Bay secondary, and let's see what Tom Brady does against the real defense. I think the MVP candidate thing, yeah, I guess you could put him ahead, but it's a 5-horse race right now. Russ Wilson, Lamar, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler, Yeah. So it's interesting, but let's wait to see who Tom Brady play a real team before we crown him as the real favorite.
Also,
Derek Carr also in that MVP race.
Oh yeah. No, dude. Hey, your Raiders 2-0, 2-0, bro.
Can't deny it.
Also, to consider with Tom Brady, he may be looking ahead to that Week 4 matchup against his old friends and now foe in Foxborough. We already mentioned Andy Dalton, dudes, but trio of other quarterbacks also left their respective games on Sunday with some injuries. So Wentz, Tua, Tyrod, they're all exited early. Which one of these injuries are you most interested in monitoring, though, entering Week 3, Reed?
Yeah, I mean, Carson Wentz, reports just came out. It's not just one ankle, Emerson. It's 2 ankles that he's got to get checked out on. So that's I don't know. I don't know if that makes a difference. Jacob Eason, I don't know if he's necessarily a guy. But the thing is, I don't think we were that high on Carson Wentz. This is going to hurt Jonathan Taylor from a singular standpoint, right? If you get 8-man boxes in with the Colts, they're already out T.Y. Hilton, and now you're just stacking the deck against Jonathan Taylor. That's really going to hurt his production. But the guy that I'm worried about the most is Tua. Once he went out, that team scored 0 points after they scored 0 points, right? Like Buffalo, I know goes in there, puts up 35, holds them to 0 points. Jacoby Brissett was a starter, in previous years, but he did not look good. And I get coming in and not being, with the ones the entire week of practice. But boy, that offense did not look good at all with Jacoby Brissett. The thing with Houston, I mean, Deshaun Watson has to be in consideration, right? Like we just don't know what that situation holds. If that's something that they have in their back pocket, who knows? That's not too worrisome. So it's probably Tua for me.
Hey, Jeff, whose injury hurts the fantasy value of guys around him more?
I mean, the the biggest impact is going to be Brandon Cooks because, Davis Mills looked absolutely terrible in the preseason. So Tyrod Taylor getting injured probably really, it was all kind of a shock what was happening in Houston anyways at this point, but with no Tyrod Taylor there, Davis Mills, this could be an abject disaster, right? We're talking about a guy who was, I can't even remember, 6th, 7th quarterback off the board this year, and now he's just thrown right into to being a starter on a team that, everybody thought was going to stink anyways. That could be really bad. I don't think that – I think Reed is right. I think that the fantasy value of the wide receivers in Miami takes a big hit, but I'm not sure how big a hit because Tua wasn't really that great a downfield passer. Short term, I actually really like Jacoby Brissett next week against the Raiders. This is a dude who could rush for 2 touchdowns easily. He's a big goal line back. The Raiders aren't good at stopping the run. I think Brissett is a really interesting solo play next week. Long term, I think Jacob Eason probably brings the most of all these backups. And I think him and Michael Pittman could even develop. Jacob Eason was a good passer in college, had a decent preseason. But these are downgrades for all these teams, with I think the biggest downgrade probably coming in Houston.
Jules, which injury is the most intriguing to you fantasy-wise?
Yeah, generally, I'm Mr. Negative here, and other people are telling me to kind of brighten up my mood. These guys already covered the negatives with Miami and with Houston. It's not good. But I look at this week 3 slate. You have Jacob Eason at $4,000 going against a Tennessee secondary that cannot stop a nosebleed right now. They've given up over 30 points in both games. Big games to Russell Wilson, big games to Kyler Murray. Jacob Eason is nothing close to that, but he's going to be a road underdog here in Tennessee, where games have been flying over in the Ryan Tannehill era, and he's going to have to pass the ball to his receivers in a very good matchup to even have a chance in that game. I'm not picking Indy to win, but there's clearly a game script where Jacob Eason can throw 2 or 3 touchdowns in this game, and Tennessee still wins by a touchdown without a sweat. So I think Eason at $4,000 in week 3 is a pretty intriguing spot that has caught my attention, Emerson.
All right, great work, you three. We are out of time. Jules, hang out. We'll need you for some showdown picks for Monday Night Football. Reed and Jeff, we'll talk to you about the Ryder Cup coming up. But right after this break, we're going to price check around the diamond. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. We'll take a little break here from football. We'll talk some baseball. Our panel this morning consisting of DraftKings contributor Matt Meiselman, RotoWire's Eric Halterman. Guys, we are going to price check, so I need your favorite DFS plays in the following salary price ranges. Let's start with a pitcher north of $8,000. Matty, who you got?
There's a lot of good choices at the high end of the salary range tonight, and I think it's going to be a little bit difficult to find a unique option. So we have Robbie Ray, who's just been a machine lately, Freddie Peralta, who's in a good spot against the Cardinals, Nestor Cortez, who's coming off a double-digit strikeout game against the Orioles. I think with all those guys there, the one that goes overlooked is Sean Manaya, who's at home against the Mariners, and his last time out, he wasn't very good, but the prior 2 starts, he actually put up 60 total DraftKings points. And I like the matchup, and Manaya probably is in the same tier of pitchers as guys like Peralta. He's definitely better than Cortez. Maybe he's not as good as Robbie Ray, but I do think Manaya is generally underrated. The matchup's good. The park is good in Oakland. He has home field advantage. So because I think he's more contrarian to a significant extent than these other 3 options, I think he's my favorite play of the group.
All right, 7 pitchers that'll cost you more than $8,000. Eric, who are you going with?
Yeah, I like a decent number of those guys. Manaya is a good choice. Nestor Cortez is a good choice. But I think I'm just going to pay up for Robbie Ray. at over 10,000 is not too expensive for him. Everything he's done seems real to me. Maybe not quite a 2.64 ERA. Most of the ERA estimators have him in the low threes, but all his peripherals are outstanding. 33.1% strikeout rate is a career high. Combining it with a 6.3% walk rate, which is a career low, and also it's barely more than a third of what he had last year when he had that awful season. He's also gotten his ground ball rate up to 37.5%, his best since 2017. Still a low number in theory. Some potential for homer issues there could knock that ERA up a bit. But the strikeouts are so real, and they've been even more real lately. In his last 6 games, he has 5 double-digit strikeout games, striking out over 43% of opposing batters in that stretch. And in 2 of those 6 starts, he struck out half the batters he faced, including his last time out, which did come against the Rays. Ordinarily, facing the same team twice in a row does give a benefit to the offense, but you could knock a full 20 percentage points off his strikeout rate from his last start, and it would still be north of 30%. So I think he can fall a lot and still be easily the top option on this slate.
All right, well, let's save the people some cash there on the hill. A pitcher under 8K. Eric?
Yeah, there's a guy I like who's well under 8K, and that's Ranger Suarez at 6,500. He's got a tough home park in Philadelphia that he'll be pitching in tonight, but he'll get to do that against an Orioles team, which is 23rd by WRC plus on the season. So a fine situation overall, I'd say. He's not as good as his 150 ERA, but a FIP of just under 3 and xFIP of about 3.5. That's quite a good starter for a guy who's cost just 6,500. Obviously, he hasn't spent most of the year as a starter. He was a reliever for the first several months. And his first couple starts were somewhat shaky, but he's been really on fire lately. His last 5 starts, a 1.55 ERA, got that strikeout rate up to 28.2% while walking just 6% of opposing batters. All the peripherals here are excellent. Even has a great ground ball rate for the season, over 60%, which helps him in that homer-friendly park in Philadelphia. So I think he's a guy who's really shown quite a lot, and he's got a pretty great matchup here, even with that tough park.
All right, what do you got, Matty?
So Suarez is the guy. For tournaments, I worry about his ownership, but the matchup is so good and his price just really doesn't make a lot of sense. The Orioles lineup also is likely to not be a very strong one because with the game being in a National League park, you probably don't get both Ryan Mountcastle and Trey Mancini in the lineup unless they do something quirky and play one of them at third base or left field or something like that. So it'll be worth keeping an eye on the Orioles lineup. I think that Suarez is just fine, assuming that you can play a GPP lineup where you get your leverage elsewhere. Maybe you don't play the chalk pay up option at pitcher, or if you do with Suarez, you play a super contrarian stack. So the real concern is just ownership, but I think Suarez is the best play. If you do want to pivot, though, John Means, other side of the game, I think also has some upside. The Phillies are a good offense, but again, JT Realmuto, who I've mentioned a few times recently, isn't playing catcher for them right now. So with him at first base, Rhys Hoskins on the IL, they're now playing 2 catchers, which really negates the value of Realmuto. It's not a very strong lineup. And if Means gets the win, it means Suarez doesn't. So with Suarez at 60% ownership, probably something like that, Means probably 6%. There's a lot of leverage to be had with that win bonus, and I think Means could do well. So if you want to pivot, John Means is probably the best guy there.
All right, how about a hitter over 5K? Dudes who can swing a good wood. Matt?
So I think Nelson Cruz is a good option for this slate. And it's not that I think Robbie Ray has a bad game. It's that I think outside of Suarez, Ray will be the highest owned player of the whole night. And we know what Ray looks like when he has a bad game, even if it doesn't happen that much recently. Like when Ray's bad, he can be really bad and balls are flying out of the park. Because the one thing that Robbie Ray isn't good at is limiting hard contact. When he gets hit around, there will be points going up on the other side, even if it's a very infrequent thing. Eric mentioned that the Rays just faced him, and I do think that matters. I mean, even though they didn't do well against him, that was also a game where Nelson Cruz didn't play. So assuming he's in the lineup, assuming a bunch of righties are in the lineup, I think that they're a very stackable team on a slate where it's going to be hard to find a contrarian offense. You have the Yankees, you have the Braves, the Astros, I think all very popular teams. It's going to be difficult to find one that isn't the chalk, and I think the Rays, with the leverage also against Robbie Ray, make a lot of sense there.
Who is your hitter over 5K, Eric?
Yeah, I like Jordan Alvarez at 5,100. He's been crushing the ball all year. Hard hit rate 54.7% is seventh best among qualified hitters. And he makes a fair amount of contact too. Not a low strikeout guy, but he's basically at league average there. He's also seeing the ball incredibly well over his last 10 games, 10 walks against just 6 strikeouts, 3 homers, 8 runs, 8 RBI over that stretch. So he's a young hitter who we know can be excellent and is excellent right now, and he'll get the platoon advantage against Jaime Barria, who is not excellent. 4.93 ERA seems well deserved. League average control and ability to keep the ball on the ground, but he does not miss bats at all, just a 13.8% strikeout rate. And when you're giving up a ton of contact to guys who hit it as hard as Alvarez does, I think that's going to be a big day for Alvarez and potentially many other Astros here.
Matt, who is the best value bat on this slate?
So the best values are probably coming from teams like the Braves, Astros. Even at 5,100, I agree. Like Alvarez is still a value there. Yankees are underpriced. But I think my favorite value team to play is the Orioles because Ranger Suarez is likely to be well above 50% in most tournaments. In some of the smaller field stuff, he could be 70 or 80% on just because that price is so ridiculous. And the Orioles are actually in a decent spot. Like Suarez is probably decent, but not a great pitcher. It is a good park. And if Suarez is bad, it's going to mean that some Orioles are good. So Austin Hayes, 3,200. Anthony Santander, same price. Trey Mancini's pretty cheap if he cracks the lineup. I like all of them. And I think with the way that the slate sets up, you have outfielders in Houston are going to be the chalk, and then outfielders on the Yankees, same thing. And no one's playing Orioles outfielders because they're going to be playing the pitcher on the other side of the game. So I think they are value plays, but most of the value comes from the leverage against the opposing pitcher.
Okay, Eric, you agree there? And then who's your value bat?
Well, I said I was going with Ranger Suarez, so I'm probably not playing those Orioles bats, but I do see it as the potential situation, especially given that park, as something you could do to go against the grain there. So I think that logic does make sense. My top value play is Eddie Rosario down at 2,500. A bit of recency bias here in that he just hit for the cycle against the Giants on Sunday. But even without that, at 2,500, that's quite cheap for a guy who's been, not a great hitter, but an above average one for several years now. He was not that early in the year with Cleveland, but since his trade to Atlanta, since coming off the injured list, he's been excellent. 320 with 5 homers and just 56 trips to the plate. He's also barreling the ball 13.3% of the time after doing that, just 4.6% of his plate appearances in Cleveland. And he's striking out way less, 10.7% strikeout rate, down from 18.5% for his career. So he's normally a low strikeout guy. Currently, he's a very low strikeout guy. He'll get the platoon advantage against Humberto Mejia, who only has 5 career starts and an ERA north of 5 in those starts. Just kind of below average all around and particularly bad at keeping the ball on the ground. Also has an ERA north of 5 in the minors this season. So pretty great situation for a guy who's been quite hot lately. And even, if he wasn't, he's not really a $2,500 level player. I think he'd, under normal circumstances, be somewhere in the mid 3s at least.
All right, dudes. Y'all know how we like to wrap up these segments. Slate approved pick time, your favorite play overall on tonight's Major League Baseball slate. Matt.
I'm having a hard time narrowing this down because there are some spots, like there's a few of them I really like. The Orioles, like I mentioned, I think the Diamondbacks as a stack against Huascar and Noah are just not going to get any attention whatsoever. If I have to pick one, though, I think it's Vlad Guerrero Jr. I didn't mention him as my favorite pay-up option, but Shane Baz is making his MLB debut for the Rays, and the Blue Jays on the other side, I mean, maybe they just strike out a bunch against him. He is a really good prospect, but it's also his MLB debut, and this could go a lot of directions. And Vlad obviously is a great hitter, but because he costs $5,900 and there's a bunch of way cheaper first basemen, I think his ownership stays like 5% at most. It could even be well lower than that at 1 or 2%. So assuming Vlad is contrarian, which I think he will be just based on the price tag and the existence of expensive pitchers that are going to make it hard to afford him, I think Vlad and all the Blue Jays could end up being my favorite stack.
Eric, what direction are you going to go in for your slate approved pick?
Well, Matt just mentioned my guy, but not necessarily in a positive light, and that's Shane Baz. I didn't pick him as my top pitcher under 8,000 because I think he's quite a big risk. I think Ranger Suarez is most likely to be the highest producing player in that range. But if you want to get some upside for cheap, Baz at just 6,900, He's a great pitching prospect. He touches triple digits. And he's been dominating the minors this season. 2.06 ERA, strikeout rate of 37.9% against just a 4.6% walk rate over 17 starts. This is what elite pitching prospects do in the upper minors, and these are the kind of guys who come up and have success right away. You might be worried about workload for the Rays, and we don't know exactly how long they intend for him to throw, but he did throw 5, 5, and 6 innings in his last 3 starts in the minors, so he's certainly stretched out to go long enough to get a win. The reason why I would say that Suarez is much more likely to have a good game is because Boz is facing a very tough matchup against the Jays and against Robbie Ray on the other side, making it tough to get a win. So there's quite a lot of downside here, but that's about as much talent as you're going to get for a pitcher this cheap. So as a flyer, I think he's a guy who's worth taking a shot on.
Gentlemen, your job here is done. The job of our NFL panel is not done. We are going to talk about the Monday Night Football matchup tonight coming up. It's the Lions, it's the Packers, DFS advice, sports betting advice coming your way right after this quick break. All right, the Lions and Packers colliding tonight, Monday Night Football, and we've got some questions about it for this little NFL showdown. Here's our panel. DraftKings contributors Pierce Dietrich, Julian Edlow, RotoWire's Paul Bruno. We're looking at the DFS prices here, guys, and the best bets available on this showdown slate. Again, Lions, Packers. Who is your captain's play for this evening, Jules?
Yeah, this is a pretty tough slate, just because you got the Lions to figure out, are they worth going to value there? And on the Packers side, it's kind of just the big names that do most of the heavy lifting. So it has me leaning towards paying up at captain. Probably, Devontae Adams would be nice, but I think matchup-wise, this is a matchup where you should run all over Detroit at home. So Aaron Jones, coming off of 5 carries for 9 yards against the Saints, absolutely dreadful, should be in a huge bounce-back spot. So I will go Aaron Jones in the captain spot for me.
Yeah, Pierce, I feel like everyone on the Packers is in a bounce-back spot. So which one is going to earn your captain's nod? Hey, you're muted there, big guy.
Yeah, and the bounce-back spot's going to be a pretty big narrative here. So, I think Rodgers is probably the best of all in this spot. His over-under is at 281 yards passing, 2.5 touchdowns. Those are pretty big numbers. He's facing a Detroit team that gave up the second most 20-yard passes last week. And that was a game that was pretty much decided early, where, the 49ers didn't really have to keep passing. So if they allowed 5 20-plus yard passes in a game against the Packers, where not only do they want to bounce back, but they want to keep their foot on the throttle the entire time and kind of erase the memory of last week. I think Rodgers definitely, also with his potential of getting these red zone touchdowns, the goal line, loving to pass, I could easily see him audibling just to get the touchdowns to make himself look better again this week.
Yeah, if you look at his career, he definitely tends to rebound after bad games. There was that 4-touchdown game against the Texans after a disappointing performance against the Bucs last season. Paul, who do you like for your captain tonight?
You know what? This isn't my first rodeo in NFL DFS, but it's my first time with you guys. And ordinarily, you'd look at the quarterbacks first, but I'm hearing that weather conditions are expected to be very poor tonight with wind and rain in the forecast at Lambeau. That means it could be ugly through the air. So it has to be a running back for me. And I'm on Aaron Jones for a big rebound here. He was such a non-factor last week that he's going to be trying to make amends tonight with a lot of people watching. And he'll want to make a statement that the Packers' embarrassing first game, including his poor production, was a mulligan. Jones has seen these conditions before and excelled in them too. He will be an important and deciding factor tonight.
Jules, where is the value in this game? I know you mentioned possibly looking over to the Detroit side.
Yeah, I don't know if this is necessarily value, but just a guy that I do want to mention is Jamal Williams. He's $7,200. He's not, a top tier guy, and he's not a value guy at all. So I think for value, the Lions have no receivers. So like rostering any of their receivers have potential value, especially as a double-digit road dog. I think MVS as a Packers wide receiver is a guy that you can look at. But I want to talk about Williams because he was the starter. Everybody thought it was going to be Swift. And Detroit said, well, this new coaching staff, we don't really like Swift. We're going with Jamal Williams. And now Swift is dinged up, too, with an injury. So even if he does play, he might not be 100%. You have Williams going against his former team on Monday Night Football. He had 9 carries for 54 yards with a touchdown against San Francisco last week. He caught 8 of 9 targets for 56 yards. So that tells me if this is a surprisingly close game, Williams is going to get the carries. If it goes as we expect and Detroit's playing from behind, Jared Goff's going to be checking down to Williams out of the backfield. So Williams is a guy that I really like on this slate, whether you want to call him value or not.
Okay, the Jamal Williams revenge game. I love it, Jules. Pierce, where can you find value?
Let's stick with that narrative that the Lions are going to be behind, so they're going to be passing a lot late. Unfortunately, the check down options are a little pricey, but if you go to the Detroit wide receivers, they're all incredibly cheap with Tyrell Williams out with a concussion. Khalif Raymond may not be playing in this game. He's questionable. So then you've got Amon-Ra and St. Brown, maybe Trinity Benson. They cost you absolutely.
Who are these guys?
Yeah, exactly. Who are these guys? But they cost you absolutely nothing, and they'll allow you to roster basically anyone that you want. And if they're going to be playing from behind and they're going to play 60 to 70 snaps, the weather, obviously it's going to be an issue, but the volume should be there. They have an opportunity, and just whoever faces off against Kevin King probably is going to be the value play of the night.
Let's see, Paul.
Yeah, the value in this game will be in the Packers tight end Robert Tonyan, guys, and the primary running backs, of course. I think both teams will have to lean on the ground game and short passes, so I look for the big tight end to be a factor, particularly in the red zone offense, where he was a stud last year. This is also a great spot where A.J. Dillon could rise up to meet some of his preseason hype. Williams and Swift, we've talked about them in the Lions backfield. They aren't as attractive to me in the visiting situation just because of the field conditions that I expect. And Hawkinson could be the busiest guy in the Detroit offense. More compelling play. He led the team in targets last week. I expected him to be in that position again tonight.
Pierce, as we open up the DK Sportsbook here, the Packers are huge 12-point favorites against the Lions. Green Bay did not look great, obviously, in Week 1 against New Orleans. Can they bounce back enough, though, here to cover an almost 2-touchdown spread?
They can. We probably shouldn't overreact to how bad that they looked in just one game. You just look at these two teams on paper, and even without the injuries, even though Detroit has tons of injuries all over the place, the Packers are a better team. They're playing at home. Imagine if the Packers had an average game last week. We would be on here debating, can the Packers cover 18 points? And we would have to consider that. So 12 points from a Packers team that I'm sure is fired up, that has plenty of potential, plenty of weapons, against a depleted Detroit team with a lot of question marks on its own end. I have no problem here with the Packers covering.
Paul, do you have a problem with the Packers covering? 49ers thought they were going to cover last week until Detroit did that thing late in the game.
You know what? I'm certainly expecting a win for the home side, but that's a lot of points given the expected conditions I keep harping on. Detroit has lost their last 4 games head-to-head against Green Bay, and that was with Stafford at quarterback, though. I view Goff as a downgrade, so that will go a long way to a 5th straight loss in this series. Goff padded his stats in the opener. You guys know that he got a lot of that in garbage time. He was ineffective when it mattered early. I think we're going to see with the iffy conditions that trend will continue. This game will look much the same as the Lions opener, except that the visitors won't come back to make it respectable in garbage time tonight like they did last week. It's an early statement game for both sides, particularly the Pack, and I think they're going to romp tonight.
Jules, who covers tonight?
Yeah, this is one of those ones where like we're all on the same side and you get scared. Oh, it's got to be the Lions, but it's the Lions. Like they don't have the guys to do this. And it's not like the Packers are just coming off a normal week one. They're in a spot where they need to show something this week. So I would not bet the Lions in this game. I would lean to the Packers with the 12. I think this one will be, the weather also, like, if it is that bad, it scares me. Like, is Green Bay going to pass enough to get up big enough to hold on to this one late? But I do think Green Bay will be up 21 or something. If the Lions want to come in and backdoor it down to 14, then fine, and you still cover. If you made me play this game, I'm going Green Bay. I'd feel a little more comfortable in Green Bay -7 first half. I think they need to come out and be strong out of the gates. So Green Bay -7 first half would be kind of my best bet on any spread in the game.
Paul, the total for this game is 49. You keep mentioning the weather conditions. So can the Lions do enough on offense to help this game get there? Can the Packers do enough?
I don't like the Lions' chance of scoring very much tonight. We're talking about a quarterback who played all of his career except for this season in very nice conditions in LA for at least half of his games. He's not used to this, and the Packers will be hungry to wipe away the ugliness of their first game, so they'll really stifle the Lions offense, and that's going to go a long way to keeping the total low. I don't expect the Packers either to throw the ball all over the yard as they might in better conditions. This will require a more opportunistic and methodical approach, and that's also going to keep the scoring down. I don't think they come near the 49 total.
Jules, how about you? What do you think?
This is tough. I wouldn't put it past the Packers to just pile it on and score 42 points by themselves in this game. But I'm not 100% convinced they'll be able to. Like the Lions, though, they don't have a good defense. They gave up 41 to San Francisco, and San Francisco was kind of spiraling down the stretch in that game. So I can talk myself into both sides here, which means that it's a great stay away spot. If you wanted me to bet anything, I would probably bet the Packers team total over, because I'm confident that they need to have an offensive bounce back just to prove it to themselves that they can dominate a team like the Lions tonight.
Pierce, what's your approach here to the total?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards the under, but Julian just about talked me into the over with how bad Detroit's defense can play in this game. They absolutely can just completely mess this up. But the offense, like Paul said, they can't get there. How are they going to get there in bad weather? And sure, they piled some points up last week because San Francisco pulled all their players, and San Francisco was glad to let Goff just check down over and over. If the weather's bad, I don't know if they're going to know. He's not going to have the defense spread out. They're all going to be close to the line of scrimmage. So those checkdowns aren't going to work, and that's assuming that Green Bay is going to let them. Green Bay wants to win this game. Green Bay wants to make a statement that they're not completely done for. So I imagine they'll continue to put pressure on Goff the entire game and not just giving these dink and dunk plays. I don't think that the Detroit offense can get there. So I will take the under.
All right, guys, good stuff. Appreciate the help. We will be asking for the help of our gorgeous golf gurus coming up next, because it's Ryder Cup week, and we got some odds to talk about. All right, we've checked football off our list this morning. We have checked baseball off our list. And let's not sleep here on golf, people, because the Ryder Cup has returned. Reed T. Fowler and Jeff Ulrich have returned. They know a lot about golf. They love the Ryder Cup. PGA Tour, high or low? Are the opening odds for the Ryder Cup too high, so too long, or too low, too short? Let's look at the team aspect here of the competition. Team USA, once again, has the best golfers in this competition, but we all know that doesn't mean anything. Minus 200 favorites against Europe. Are those odds too high or too low, Reed?
I think it's a little too low. I think maybe like minus 150, minus 175. And why I'm saying to bake that in is you take a look at, how they fared with the talent like they have on this team, right? Their average world ranking, guys, is 9th amongst their players. It's like 30th. For Team Europe. So you have that baked into it. But the big thing is, can these guys all get along for 1 week, Jeff? That is a big thing, right? Because the last 4 of the last 5 Ryder Cups have been won by Team Europe. And it's not like, we've been short in the US on talent. We have guys like, nine of the top 11 players in the world ranking are on the Ryder Cup team. So I'd say that it's a little too low right now. But I get why it's there, just because Team Europe just plays so well. You got to pick in the experience. The guys like Poulter, Sergio, Paul Casey, those guys are too good in this type of format.
The team chemistry aspect, Jeff, is that going to have an impact here on your betting approach?
Yeah. To answer Reed's question, these odds are way too low. 7 of the last 9, Europe has won the Ryder Cup, and they've embarrassed the States. Every year of those 9 events, Europe has been at a talent deficit. I would actually argue this year, they're at less of a talent deficit. I don't care about the world rankings. Now they've got guys like sneaky guys like Hovland's on the team. People probably forget. It's like, why isn't he playing for America? And then you've got Shane Lowry playing some of the best golf of his life. No, this format is terrible for the Americans. Absolutely terrible. They all go about, they're kind of mini superstars in the United States. They're mini celebrities. They go about individual. They're used to doing their own thing, searching for those big paychecks. And then they got to come together for 1 week and put all that aside. No, they've been terrible at doing that for the last 2 decades. Europe has been great at doing that exact same thing, the complete opposite. And now you're getting plus 200 to bet the Euros. Absolutely. This line on the Americans is way too low. It should be closer to even if we're being dead honest. But the talent deficit, I guess you can say that the Americans should be the small favorites here, but at minus 200, way too low.
And Jeff, I will say this too, like the format for like European team, you have different countries all coming together, right? You would argue that would work against something like Team Europe, but like you mentioned in the States, they're all in their little silos and like, this is how we routine.
Just to beat this home point, the States didn't even take their best match play players. Billy Horschel, Kevin Kisner, Kuchar, like
Patrick
past
Reed.
winners.
Yeah,
of the
Captain
match play event. Maybe
America.
not Kuchar, but anyways.
I know there's a lot of focus on the Brooks Bryson aspect, and we all remember the disastrous Tiger Woods Phil Mickelson pairing years ago. That was at Oakland Hills. That sunk the team before it even left the port, for crying out loud.
Hal Sutton.
Yeah, right? All right, let's look at some individual props here, dudes. There is a prop here for top combined point score. Justin Thomas is the favorite for that, plus 800. Too high or too low, Jeff?
I mean, it's too low. I mean, I kind of like Justin Thomas. I mean, again, he's really performed well in these events for the States. I mean, sometimes when the team hasn't shown up, he's shown up, had a really good President's Cup, but like, where has his putter been over the last couple months? It's been non-existent. It's really hampered him to get in contention at the playoffs, and now you're expecting him to just sink all the putts against a really, really like gritty Euro team. No thanks. I mean, plus 800, it's decent odds, but I think you got to go down the board here. Personally, I would look more to the Euro side as well. I think the one thing about taking the top points scorer on an American side, they're so deep with talent. If Justin Thomas can't sink a putt in his first foursome, maybe he gets sat, and then those points aren't going to be there. Whereas guys like Rory, who I really like at plus 1,000, he's playing all the matches because they don't quite have that deep a bench, right? And if Rory gets hot, I mean, he will get hot. So I'm not really too big on Justin Thomas at plus 800. I think those odds are too low. I'd rather look to the Euro guys at bigger odds.
Rita, it's looking like John Rahm has the same odds there, plus 800. Xander's plus 900, along with Jordan Spieth.
Yeah, I think I'm right here with Jeff too. Is when you're looking at this, you need to pick the guys who are going to be in all 5 matches, right? That is the first and foremost. That's just how you're going to get to that. And a guy like JT can definitely be that guy, right? He's a tee to green, maven. He's a guy who can hit it far. He's great with his wedges. But to Jeff's point, that putter has not been there, especially on Pete Dye courses over the last 24 rounds. He's like 22nd amongst these, the 24 players that are going to be here. Competing. That's not great. It's not great, Bob. If you want to do that, if you want to get on those greens, a guy like Poulter, right? Poulter is someone that you want to take a look at on the European side, which we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, I'd rather go deeper on the U.S. side if I have to. And I know you guys think I'm doing a homer pick, but a guy like Tony Finau at plus 1,000, he's another player that could match up with all the type of players on the team. Maybe he gets in 4 matches and he gets you 4 wins. That's something that I'd rather get on the American side because they're so deep.
Reed, you mentioned like guys who are going to play in all the events. Have like the pairings and all that stuff. When does that schedule come out? That comes out like later this week, right? So
later this week, yeah.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to give everyone a heads up there. Jon Rahm was about 5th on the board a couple days ago, but now he is tied. He is tied with Thomas, as I mentioned, plus 800. So are for Rahm here specifically, are those odds too high or too low?
I mean, I think they're too low. Look, like he's the best player in the world. But look, he's going to be in all these matches. He really is. And maybe I'm making the case that like I like Rahm to be the top point scorer because he was 8th at Kiowa, he was 9th at the Players. Those are both Pete Dye courses. But I don't know. Like I mentioned, with these type of things, you want to get some of these guys that are a little bit deeper on the board. I think Victor Hovland, like Jeff mentioned, is someone that could definitely get there because he has the archetype, the type of game to do well at Whistling Straits. He hits the ball a mile, and he's been putting a lot better. So I love Rahm. I think he's going to be in all these matches, but give me someone like a guy like Victor Hovland deeper.
Jeff, did he just miss the cut in Napa?
Yes, he did.
Last week? Yeah, but he did have that stomach illness, and he said the reason I didn't play like the Pro-Am, he's like, I could have played the Pro-Am, but I would have made a lot of stops
Honestly,
at the restroom, you know?
Europe is so cerebral at this event. I think they sent Jon Rahm to the West. He missed the cut there on purpose to give the. I'm not kidding when I say this. I swear to God, I think Euro made Jon Rahm miss the cut there on purpose. That's just a conspiracy theory. I said, be careful, Americans, before getting too confident here. This Euro team is crafty. But let's talk about the odds. Yeah, I think the odds are more appropriate for Rahm. I mean, I think he's got a very good shot of playing all 5 matches, probably a better shot than JT, which I think makes him a better bet there. But I'm completely with Reed here. I think Hovland is a very, very good target at plus 1,400, almost double the odds of Rahm. Hovland is such a talent. I think if he gets hot early on in this event, he will be out there for all 5 events too. I also like Rory, like I said. I feel very confident that like Rory and Hovland are going to have a very good shot at playing 5 matches. Whereas again, you're looking at the American side, it's just so deep that they could just mix and match so much, and they could really try and give guys a break, and you just lose out on that one match. So I would rather target the American in this, the Euros in this prop, this player prop for top combined points score, and I think Hovland probably offers you the best value there, plus 1,400.
All right, and so I know you're going to target the Europeans, as you just mentioned, but what about our guy Bryson DeChambeau, plus 1,200 to be the top combined point scorer at the Ryder Cup? Like, is that something worth chasing? Like, those odds too high, too low? You can get some value there. What do you think, Jeff?
I don't even know what odds you said, but they're definitely too low. I think you said plus
1,200.
I mean, look, again, we bring it back to like the President's Cup. This guy lost the team match to Byung-Hun An and Adam Scott. He lost, he lost to Alex Noren in the last Ryder Cup. He halved with Adam Hadwin. These aren't elite golfers I'm throwing out here, the names. So that's kind of my point here. This guy's struggled in match play, and I love Bryson. You know, he's got an intimidating game off the tee. Maybe Whistling Straits is just like, he just fits it right in and he just gets on a roll. It could definitely happen, but no, man, this is just not a guy I definitely want to chase in this format, unfortunately. Hope he turns it around. I really hope he has a positive event because there's just so much negativity about him. But this is not a player I want to chase in the match play.
And he's going to be the center of attention all week. He is the sports lightning rod, and he was making headlines for a decision to put in 2-a-days for the Long Drive World Championship, which is going to be competing in the day after the Ryder Cup. Reed, 45 seconds to go in the show. What do you think about his odds here?
Yeah, I mean, talking about conspiracy theory, what if he plays all 5 matches because he's the lightning rod that this team needs? I doubt it. But if that's the case, then these odds are pretty nice. 0-3 in 2018 for Bryson in his matches, 0 points. And so that scares you quite a bit. Love the guy. I think he's great for the team, but I don't know. I just can't take these.
He's never won a team match in
Never won a
President
team
Cup
match.
history. So.
Yeah. I mean, the big question looming around him is just who will he play with? You know, there seems like he's just got a bunch of
His
little
caddy.
mini rivalries. Yeah.
Jordan
And who
Spieth
knows
is a good
and
one,
who knows
too.
if the caddy makes it through the whole tournament. Anywho, guys, love you. That's a show, everybody. 3 Madden games on the slate coming up right after this.